The message came just as the waiter poured her water. Sorry, not coming. Something came up. Good luck. That was it. 4 words in a period that didn't belong. Claire Morgan stared at her phone screen, her pulse sinking with every second of silence that followed. The restaurant hummed around her, forks clinking, laughter rising from tables meant for 2. She had dressed carefully, even put on the lipstick her sister swore made her look less tired. But now she was just a woman alone at a table for 2, pretending not to be humiliated. The waiter cleared his throat gently. Would you like to wait, ma'am? Claire smiled, brittle but polite. No, I think I'll just order the soup. He nodded, the kind of look passing between them that said he'd seen this before. Maybe not exactly this, a blind date canceled by text before it even began, but close enough. He took the menu and vanished, leaving her to sit in the quiet humiliation of her own hope. Outside, rain streaked against the window, slicing the city lights into blurred ribbons. Claire's phone vibrated again, and for one stupid second, her heart leapt. But it was just a message from her bank reminding her of an overdraft fee. She let out a shaky laugh, part amusement, part exhaustion. Across the room, a man in a dark gray suit looked up from his laptop. He had the kind of presence that seemed to still the air, composed, self-contained, the sort of calm that made people instinctively lower their voices. Michael Reed didn't mean to stare, but something in the way the woman sat, the quiet poise masking heartbreak, pulled at a part of him he'd thought long buried. When her soup arrived, Claire picked at it absently, too aware of the empty chair across from her. She wasn't angry at the man who canceled. Disappointed, sure. But mostly she was angry at herself, for caring, for believing that maybe, just once, something good might actually stick. As she fished out a piece of bread from the bowl, a voice interrupted. Forgive me, it said, calm but warm. But no one should have to eat alone at a table like this. She looked up. The man from across the room stood there, tall and rain-damp, holding a half-finished espresso. His tone wasn't patronizing. It was something rarer, gentle. I'm sorry, she said, uncertain. He gestured to the chair opposite her. May I sit? You look like you could use company that isn't a screen. Claire blinked. Do you usually walk up to random women in restaurants? He smiled slightly. Only when they look like they're debating whether to throw their phone or drown it in soup. Despite herself, she laughed. It wasn't the loud, free kind of laugh, just a quiet, startled one. It's been that kind of night. Then I'll make it better, he said, sliding into the seat before she could stop him. Michael. Claire, she replied, still wary but oddly intrigued. Nice to meet you, Claire. Though to be clear, I'm not trying to be a replacement date. Good, she said, arching an eyebrow. You'd be overqualified. He chuckled, and for the first time that evening, the air around her felt lighter. They talked, at first about nothing. The weather, the soup, her shoes, which he said looked too brave for rain. But somewhere between her second glass of water and his third refill of espresso, the conversation shifted. He asked her what she did, and she told him about her night shifts at the hospital, about patients who whispered confessions to her like prayers in the dark. And you, she asked finally. What's your story, Michael? I build things, he said, mostly companies, sometimes problems. That's vague, she teased. It's safer that way. There was something in his tone, a practiced evasiveness, like a man used to hiding in plain sight. She didn't press. When the check came, he reached for it, but she stopped him. Please don't. I can pay for my own soup. I know, he said, eyes kind, but let me pay for the company. She hesitated, then let him. When she rose to leave, he stood too, following her to the door. Outside, the rain had turned heavier. The world smelled like wet concrete and possibility. You have an umbrella? He asked. I'll manage. He opened his, black, worn, the edges fraying slightly. Then share mine. I don't even know you. Then get to know me on the walk. She wanted to refuse, to prove she didn't need saving, but her heart, still bruised from disappointment, whispered otherwise. So she stepped under the umbrella. They walked side by side down the slick pavement. The rain softened into a rhythm, steady and quiet, their footsteps falling in sync. Do you always rescue strangers in restaurants? She asked. Only the ones who look like they forgot how to be seen, he said. His words caught her off guard. She looked up at him, about to respond, but before she could, the wind shifted, blowing rain across her face. She laughed, brushing it from her cheeks. Michael stopped just for a moment and looked at her in a way no one had in a long time. Not as someone fragile or unlucky, but as someone real. At the corner, she paused. This is me, he nodded. Then this is good night. Thank you, she said softly. For the walk. For showing up. He smiled, but there was something unreadable behind it. Don't thank me yet. Why not? Because I have a feeling this isn't the last time we'll see each other. She laughed. You're sure of yourself. Only about some things. He tilted the umbrella toward her before stepping back into the rain, unprotected. Keep it, he said. She frowned. It's yours. Call it a loan, he said. You can return it when it stops raining. And then he was gone, disappearing into the mist, his silhouette dissolving under the city lights. Claire looked down at the umbrella in her hand, water dripping from its edges. She couldn't explain it, but something about the weight of it felt different, like a promise she didn't yet understand. The umbrella sat by her door for 3 days before she touched it again. Every morning when Claire left for her shift, she'd glance at it, propped against the wall like an unanswered question. Each time she told herself to forget it, to forget him. A stranger with a nice smile and good timing didn't get to linger in her life, not when she'd spent years learning how to need no one. But forgetting proved harder than she expected. At the hospital, she fell back into rhythm. The steady hum of machines, the shuffle of nurses, the scent of disinfectant. All of it wrapped around her like armor. Her world was fluorescent lights and whispered prayers, and she preferred it that way. People left too easily outside these walls. Here, at least, she knew what leaving looked like. Still, sometimes, between patients, she'd catch herself glancing toward the rain-streaked windows and think of him. Michael, the calm in his voice, the warmth behind his questions, the way he hadn't tried to fix her sadness, but simply sat with it. That was what stayed with her most. It was nearly a week later when their paths crossed again. She was charting patient notes at the nurse's station when the hallway went strangely quiet. Whispers traveled like static. A tall man in a dark suit stood by the administrative office, talking with Dr. Ellison, the hospital director. His presence didn't blend. It commanded. Claire's pen froze mid-note. It was him, Michael Reed. Her first thought was absurdly practical. How did he even find me? But then she caught herself, remembering his casual tone that night. You can return it when it stops raining. So he'd come for the umbrella. That was all. She should have been relieved. Instead, her pulse kicked hard against her ribs. He turned then, as if sensing her. Their eyes met across the sterile hallway, and in that split second, the hospital, her world of order and distance, tilted slightly. He smiled. Subtle, polite, but there was recognition in it. Dr. Ellison motioned toward her. Nurse Morgan, this is Mr. Reed, one of our foundation partners. Foundation partner. The words hit like a jolt. So that's who he was. She'd known the name before, of course, everyone did. Reed Holdings, technology, medicine, infrastructure. One of the richest men in the country. A billionaire had sat with her in a cheap restaurant and offered her half his umbrella. Miss Morgan, Michael said, stepping closer. It's good to see you again. She stiffened. I didn't realize I'd been seeing one of our donors. You didn't ask, he said. His voice carried that same quiet steadiness she remembered. And I didn't think it mattered. Dr. Ellison, oblivious to the undercurrent between them, clapped his hands. Mr. Reed's foundation is funding the new pediatric expansion. He'll be touring the facility over the next few days. Of course, Claire said, forcing professionalism into her tone. Welcome to St. Augustine's, Mr. Reed. Michael, he corrected gently. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She just turned back to her chart. If he noticed the stiffness in her shoulders, he didn't mention it. That evening she found him again, this time in the cafeteria. It was nearly midnight, and the room was mostly empty. The overhead lights cast everything in a pale, sleepless glow. Claire sat at the far end, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He appeared at her table without preamble, holding a tray with 2 cups and a small paper bag. "I didn't think you'd still be here," he said. "I'm on night shift," she replied. "Then you probably haven't eaten." He slid the bag toward her. "Cafeteria muffins. Not exactly gourmet, but edible." She blinked at it. "You really shouldn't be here." He tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because you're you. And you're you," he said. "Seems fair." She sighed. "Michael, you're a hospital benefactor. If anyone sees you sitting here, they'll assume that I'm talking to someone I like talking to." Her pulse stumbled. "That you're crossing lines." He studied her for a moment, eyes calm but curious. "Do you always see the worst possibility first?" "It saves disappointment." He smiled just barely. "That's one way to survive. Not the best, though." "Don't psychoanalyze me," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "Not analyzing," he said. "Just observing." "Same thing." "Maybe," he said, "but observation doesn't require judgment." She set her cup down a little harder than necessary. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." Silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Against her will, Claire found herself softening. He wasn't supposed to be here, not in her world of sleepless nights and cheap coffee, yet somehow he fit. Finally, she asked, "So which part of this tour requires cafeteria food at midnight?" He leaned back, amusement flickering in his eyes. "The part where I get to talk to someone who doesn't want anything from me." Her chest tightened. "You don't know that." "I know enough," he said. "You didn't ask what I do. You didn't ask for money. You just shared an umbrella." "I was being polite." "You were being kind," he said. "There's a difference." Something in his tone, a quiet certainty, unsettled her. She looked away first. When she finally met his eyes again, he was smiling softly. "For the record," he said, "you still haven't returned my umbrella." She frowned. "It hasn't stopped raining?" He chuckled. "Then I guess we're even." A small, reluctant laugh escaped her. "You really don't quit, do you?" "Not when it feels like the start of something worth staying for," he said, his voice gentle but certain. Before she could answer, the intercom crackled overhead, calling her back to the ward. Claire stood gathering her notes, her heartbeat louder than it should have been. "Thank you for the muffin, Mr. Reed." "Michael," he said again. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Good night, Michael." As she walked away, she heard his voice behind her, quiet almost to himself. "Good night, Claire." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't dread the rest of her shift. The next few days blurred together in a rhythm of fluorescent lights and exhaustion. Claire worked 3 double shifts in a row, catching only fragments of sleep in the break room between rounds. The hospital was short-staffed, as usual, and she didn't have the luxury of turning down extra hours. Bills didn't wait for dignity. Still, every time she passed the pediatric wing, she thought of him. Michael Reed. She told herself it was just because his name was on every plaque in the building, engraved in that sleek serif font that whispered power. But it wasn't the name that haunted her. It was the man who wore it so quietly. And then, inevitably, he showed up again. It was late afternoon, a rare lull between emergencies, when she heard the deep timbre of his voice echoing down the corridor. She froze before she could stop herself. "The new wing needs better ventilation," he was saying. "Kids shouldn't recover in rooms that smell like chemicals." Dr. Ellison laughed nervously. "You're not wrong, Mr. Reed. We do what we can within the budget. Your foundation's been incredibly generous." "I'm not worried about generosity," Michael said. "I'm worried about outcomes." Claire hesitated by the doorway, listening despite herself. He didn't sound like a man obsessed with reputation or profit. He sounded, if such a thing existed in his world, like someone who cared. Dr. Ellison spotted her first. "Ah, Nurse Morgan, perfect timing. Mr. Reed was just asking about patient logistics. Maybe you can explain how we manage overnight rotations?" Claire stiffened. "I'm sure one of the coordinators could Please," Michael interrupted, his voice low, unhurried. "I'd rather hear from someone who actually does the work." Something in his tone left no room for protest. She stepped closer, her heart inexplicably unsteady. "Well," she began, "rotations depend on census. Nights are the hardest. We're usually 2 nurses short, so we float between wards. He listened intently, eyes on her, not his phone or notes. How often do you work doubles? She shrugged. Often enough to forget what day it is. He frowned. That's not sustainable. Neither is life, she said before she could catch herself. For a beat, silence. Then unexpectedly he smiled. Small, genuine. You're honest. I like that. Dr. Ellison chuckled awkwardly. Nurse Morgan's known for her bluntness. Then she's exactly the kind of person we need more of, Michael said. Her cheeks warmed, though she wasn't sure if it was from embarrassment or something else. When the meeting ended, he lingered by the door as the others filed out. Walk with me? He asked. I have rounds. It'll take 5 minutes. It was ridiculous. She should have said no, but the words didn't come. They walked down the corridor together, past the glow of monitors and the soft beeping of machines. His stride was steady, deliberate, like someone who'd spent his life walking through rooms where everyone moved aside. How long have you worked here? He asked. 6 years. That's a long time. It's a job, she said simply. You don't stay for the glamour. He smiled at that. You make it sound like the hospital's a battlefield. It is some nights, she said. Only the injuries are invisible. They passed a window overlooking the city. Rain streaked the glass again, faint but persistent. She followed his gaze toward the gray skyline. Do you ever get tired of fixing things? She asked. He glanced at her. What do you mean? You run a company, you donate millions, you micromanage hospitals that don't belong to you. Don't you ever want to stop holding everything together? He didn't answer immediately. You sound like someone who knows what that feels like. She looked away. Maybe I do. He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, You shouldn't have to. Before she could reply, her pager buzzed sharply. Room 214, she murmured, already turning. I have to go. He nodded. Of course. As she hurried off, she half expected him to fade back into the distance, to vanish into whatever boardroom he belonged to. But later that evening, when she stopped by the cafeteria, she found him there again. Alone, seated at a corner table with a stack of papers and the same terrible coffee she'd teased him about. You're going to get sick if you keep drinking that, she said, walking past. He looked up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You came back. I work here, she said, though her tone lacked conviction. Still counts. She hesitated, then sat across from him. You don't seem like the type who eats in hospital cafeterias. I'm not, he admitted, but I wanted to understand what my money actually touches. And what's the verdict? He took a sip, grimaced. It's humbling. She laughed softly. That's one word for it. He leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. You know, most people treat me differently when they find out who I am. You didn't. That's because I didn't know, she said. And if I had, I wouldn't have sat with you. He smiled. Then I'm glad you didn't. Why? Because I like the version of you that didn't care about my name. She felt her pulse quicken. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because people like you don't mean them. His smile faded, but not out of offense. You think kindness comes with a price tag? In my experience, everything does. He leaned back, studying her. Then maybe you've just been buying from the wrong people. She had no answer for that. When her break ended, she stood to leave. You shouldn't be here this late. The press would have a field day. He tilted his head. And you? What about me? Would you care if they did? She hesitated, then said softly, I've been talked about before. The world survives. He smiled faintly. So do you. As she turned to go, he called after her. Claire. She looked back. You never returned my umbrella. She laughed quietly. It hasn't stopped raining yet. He nodded. Good. Then maybe it's still ours. The words shouldn't have stayed with her as long as they did. But they did. Long after her shift ended. Long after the rain faded into dawn. By the following week, Claire could feel the shift in the air around her. It wasn't subtle. It was sharp, like the quiet before a storm. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Colleagues who used to smile at her in the corridors now looked at her with polite, brittle curiosity. She didn't need to ask why. News in a hospital spread faster than infection, and Michael Reed wasn't a man who could walk anywhere unnoticed. Every nurse, every technician, every administrator knew his name, and now they knew hers, spoken in the same breath. The first whisper reached her in the staff lounge. She's the one he keeps visiting. Late nights, coffee breaks. Come on, it's obvious. He's a billionaire. What's a nurse got that he needs? Claire set her coffee down, throat tight. She'd dealt with worse. The occasional jealous coworker, the impatient families. But this was different. This was judgment dressed up as gossip. She left the room before they could notice her, their laughter echoing long after she turned the corner. That night, her sister called. Anna's voice was warm, but cautious. "Hey, kid, you doing okay?" "I'm fine. Are you?" Anna paused. "Because the internet doesn't think so." Claire's stomach dropped. "What?" "Don't panic," Anna said quickly. "It's just a forum thread. Someone posted photos of you and Michael at the hospital cafeteria. Nothing bad, just..." She hesitated. "They're calling you the mystery nurse." Claire rubbed her temples. "Great. Look, I know you, Claire. You don't do well with people watching. You should..." "I can handle it," Claire interrupted. "It'll blow over." Anna sighed. "You sound like Mom. Pretending you don't care doesn't make it hurt less." "I'm not pretending." "Yes, you are," Anna said softly. "Just be careful, okay? Men like him live in storms. Don't step into one unless you're ready to get wet." After the call, Claire sat in silence for a long time. She hated that Anna was right. 2 days later, she found Michael waiting outside the hospital, leaning against his car in the drizzle. He looked entirely out of place in the gray morning light, polished, calm, untouchable. "You can't keep doing this," she said as soon as she saw him. He straightened. "Doing what?" "Showing up here. People are talking." "Let them," he said simply. "You don't get it." Her voice rose despite herself. "You're Michael Reed. You can walk through fire and come out untouched. I can't. They'll tear me apart." He met her eyes, quiet but unyielding. "Then tell me where to stand so I don't cast a shadow on you." The words hit her harder than they should have. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why?" "Because it makes me think you mean them." "I do." Claire exhaled sharply, glancing away. The rain had started again, soft, steady. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've had to survive." "Then tell me," he said. "Let me know you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about the years of debt, the nights she'd fallen asleep sitting up between shifts, the endless cycle of saving people while forgetting herself. But she couldn't. That was her private war, not something to hand to a man like him. "You wouldn't understand," she said finally. "Try me." She looked at him then, really looked, the careful strength in his posture, the faint lines of weariness around his eyes. He wasn't as invincible as he looked. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. "Why me?" He hesitated, and for once his composure faltered. "Because when I met you, you didn't look at me the way everyone else does. You didn't want anything from me, and I realized I'd spent years surrounded by people who only saw what I could give them, not who I am. That's not my problem," she said, though her voice softened. "Maybe not," he said, "but maybe it's mine." Before she could answer, a voice called from behind her. "Miss Morgan." It was Dr. Ellison standing by the doors, eyes narrowing at the sight of Michael. "We're starting the staff meeting." "I'll be right there," she said quickly. Ellison nodded but lingered a second too long before disappearing inside. Michael sighed. "You're right. I shouldn't have come." "Then why did you?" He gave her a small, helpless smile. "Because I wanted to. Wanting isn't reason enough." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's honest." She stared at him, torn between anger and something she didn't dare name. "You should go." He nodded once. "If that's what you want." She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Claire sat in the empty break room, scrolling through her phone. She shouldn't have looked, but curiosity was stronger than fear. There they were, grainy photos of her and Michael in the rain, at the cafeteria, in the hallways. Each one captioned with speculation, sarcasm, and cruelty. The billionaire's pet nurse, Cinderella with a stethoscope. Her throat burned. She wanted to throw the phone across the room. The door opened behind her. She expected a colleague. Another whisper disguised as concern. Instead, it was Dr. Ellison. He closed the door softly. "Claire," he said, his tone almost kind, "you're one of our best. But this attention, it's becoming a problem. I didn't ask for any of it. I know, but perception is everything. If this continues, the board may have to review your position." She stared at him. "You're saying I could lose my job because a man talked to me?" "I'm saying the world doesn't care about fairness," he said. "It cares about optics." When he left, she sat in the silence he'd left behind, her chest aching. Outside, thunder rolled. She pressed a hand against the cool window pane and whispered to the empty room, "You were right, Anna. He lives in storms." Then almost to herself, "And now I do too." The world did what it always does. It devoured a story it didn't understand. By morning, Claire's face was everywhere. Not her full name, of course, but it didn't matter. The mystery nurse trended online. Photos of her and Michael walking in the rain were splashed across gossip sites, tabloids, and social media feeds. People speculated, analyzed, and judged. Some praised her supposed luck. Most called her a gold digger. At the hospital, the whispers grew teeth. "Did you see the article?" one nurse murmured. "She's smiling in one of the photos." "Well, wouldn't you?" Claire walked past them without a word. She learned that silence hurt less than defense, but inside she was unraveling. By noon, Dr. Ellison called her into his office. He didn't look angry, just tired. "Claire, you know why I've called you?" She nodded. "The photos." "Yes. The board has been fielding calls all morning. They're concerned." "Concerned," she repeated, her voice thin. "Because someone took pictures of me walking outside?" "Because of who you were walking with," Ellison corrected gently. "Mr. Reed's name draws attention, and attention, especially the wrong kind, damages credibility." She stared at him, disbelief and humiliation warring inside her. "Are you seriously saying my career is at risk because I happen to know someone rich?" "I'm saying optics matter, Claire. The foundation's donation accounts for nearly a quarter of our operating budget. The board wants to avoid any appearance of what?" She cut in sharply. "Impropriety? Scandal? You think I'm sleeping with him?" "Claire!" "No," she said, her voice cracking. "Say it, because that's what everyone else is thinking." Ellison looked at her for a long moment, his sigh heavy. "You're an exceptional nurse. I don't want this to destroy your reputation. Take some time off, just a few days. Let the noise die down." She felt the air leave her lungs. "So they win." "It's not about winning," he said softly. "It's about survival." But it was about winning, and Claire knew it. She left the office trembling, her ID badge suddenly feeling like a chain around her neck. Michael called that evening. She almost didn't answer, staring at the screen until the ringing stopped. But when it started again, she picked up. "Claire," he said, "don't hang up." Her voice was flat. "I shouldn't even be talking to you." "I know what's happening," he said quickly. "I saw the headlines. They're wrong. All of it." "They're not wrong," she snapped. "They're just cruel." He paused. "Then let me fix it." "Fix it?" She laughed bitterly. "How? With a press release? A donation? You can't fix this with money, Michael. This isn't about money." "Isn't it?" she said. "Everything in your world is about money. That's why they're tearing me apart. Because I don't belong in it." He went quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Of course you didn't," she said. "People like you never mean to. You just move through life, and everyone else has to clean up the wreckage." "Claire, I have to go," she said, her throat tightening. "Don't call me again." She hung up before he could reply. 2 days passed. She didn't go to work. She barely left her apartment. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Anna, from co-workers, from journalists pretending to be concerned citizens. She ignored them all. Until one afternoon, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find a delivery man holding a plain envelope. "From Mr. Reed," he said. She hesitated before taking it. Inside was a single folded newspaper. The front page headline read, "Michael Reed speaks. She is not my scandal. She is my equal." Her breath caught. She read the article once, then again. The quotes were his tone, his words. I met her by chance. She didn't know my name, and for the first time in years, neither did I. What began as kindness became friendship, and I won't stand by while that friendship is twisted into something ugly. Beneath that was a photo of him standing at a podium, serious but unflinching. She is not my scandal. She is my equal. Claire's hands trembled. He had gone public, not to deny knowing her, but to defend her. For the first time in days, she cried. By evening, her phone buzzed again, this time with texts she couldn't ignore. Anna, you saw it? Claire, yes. Anna, you okay? Claire, I don't know. There was another pause before Anna sent one last message. Then maybe you should ask him. It took 3 tries before she found the courage to dial his number. He answered on the first ring. Claire! Her voice shook. Why did you do it? Because they were hurting you, he said simply. You didn't have to defend me. Yes, he said, I did. That article, it's everywhere. You just made things worse. Maybe, he said, but at least now they'll hear the truth. Michael, she whispered, the truth doesn't matter to people like them. Then it matters to me, he said. She pressed her hand to her forehead, tears burning behind her eyes. You could lose everything for this. He laughed softly without humor. I've lost more important things before. The line went quiet. Neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, You once told me you were used to disappointment. I don't want to be one of them. You already aren't, she said, voice breaking, and for the first time she believed it. The next morning, Claire woke to sunlight streaming through her blinds and 1,000 unread messages. Reporters, co-workers, strangers. Everyone had something to say. Her phone had turned into a weapon she couldn't put down. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through headlines until her chest ached. Billionaire's bold defense of Nurse Morgan. Michael Reed shuts down rumors with statement of respect. Lover loyalty. Reed's speech sparks debate. Her name, her life, was now clickbait. She threw the phone aside and buried her face in her hands. Michael had meant well, but his declaration had dragged her back into the storm, brighter and louder than before. By noon, the hospital called. Claire, it's Ellison. His tone was clipped, formal. The board's requested you and Mr. Reed attend a meeting this afternoon, 3 o'clock, conference room A. She froze. Both of us? Yes. Why? To address the public attention, he said delicately. It's out of control. They want closure. Closure, she repeated, like this is a scandal they can just file away. Ellison sighed. Just be there, Claire. Please. When the line went dead, she stared at her reflection in the darkened screen of her phone. She looked tired, small, and far too fragile for what was coming. Michael was already there when she arrived. He stood by the window, calm as ever, though the tension in his shoulders gave him away. He turned as she entered, his gaze softening. You came. I didn't have a choice, she said quietly. I know, he replied. Neither did I. The conference room was glass-walled and sterile, the kind of place where empathy went to die. Around the long table sat the hospital's board members, Ellison among them, each wearing the same polite mask of professionalism. Miss Morgan, the chairwoman began, thank you for coming. Mr. Reed, always a pleasure. Let's skip the niceties, Michael said evenly. You want to discuss the fallout? The chairwoman nodded. Precisely. The media coverage has placed this hospital in an uncomfortable position. While we appreciate your foundation support, Mr. Reed, this situation has created complications. Claire sat stiffly, hands clasped in her lap. Complications, she echoed. You mean me? One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Miss Morgan, this isn't personal. It's about the hospital's reputation. Then maybe the hospital should stop pretending compassion is bad PR, Michael said sharply. Mr. Reed, Ellison interjected, no one doubts your intentions, but your public statement made it difficult for us to maintain neutrality. Michael leaned forward. Neutrality isn't moral, doctor. It's cowardice dressed in policy. The room fell silent. Claire stared down at her hands, her pulse hammering. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Miss Morgan, would you like to make a statement of your own? To clarify your position? Claire hesitated. My position? Yes, the woman said smoothly. It might help if you distanced yourself from Mr. Reed's comments. Claire looked up slowly, disbelief cutting through her exhaustion. You want me to disown his defense? We want to protect you, Ellison said gently. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. You can't protect me. You're just protecting yourselves. The air tightened. Michael looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something like pride flicker in his eyes. Claire rose to her feet. You want a statement? Fine. Miss Morgan, the chairwoman began. No, Claire said firmly. You've all been talking about me. Maybe it's time you listen to me. She took a breath, her voice trembling at first, then steadying. I didn't ask for this attention. I didn't want to be anyone's headline. But you don't get to decide my worth based on a photograph. I am a nurse. I've worked every night shift this hospital has thrown at me. I've held dying hands and comforted families who will never remember my name. I've earned my place here, and I won't apologize for being seen. Silence followed, stunned, heavy. Michael stood beside her, his expression unreadable, but his presence grounding. You heard her, he said quietly. If this hospital values integrity, then start showing it. The chairwoman folded her hands. You both need to understand. This will have consequences. Michael's tone was calm but razor sharp. Then their mind to bear. When the meeting adjourned, Claire didn't wait for him. She walked out into the hallway, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. But before she could reach the elevators, Michael caught up. Claire, he said softly. She stopped. You shouldn't have come to that meeting. I wasn't going to let you stand there alone. She turned, eyes blazing. You keep saying that, but don't you see? Every time you stand next to me, it gets worse. They see your name beside mine, and suddenly I'm a story again. His jaw tightened. Then tell me what you want me to do. I want you to stop fighting my battles, she said, her voice breaking. Because if I'm ever going to survive this, I need to know I can win them myself. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. All right. She expected anger, maybe even disappointment. Instead, his expression was one of quiet respect. You were extraordinary in there, he said. You reminded them, and me, why truth matters. Her throat tightened. Don't make this about truth, Michael. It's about survival. Maybe, he said, but sometimes they're the same thing. He turned to leave, but paused halfway down the hall. I'll step back if that's what you want, but I meant what I said. You're not my scandal. You're my equal. And then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the echo of the hospital's sterile corridor. Claire stood there for a long time, unsure whether the ache in her chest was relief or something dangerously close to longing. The storm faded, but the silence it left behind was worse. For the first time in weeks, the hospital wasn't buzzing with whispers. People no longer paused when Claire walked by. They simply looked through her, as though pretending she didn't exist could erase what had happened. The scandal had stopped being entertainment. It had become fatigue. Claire had become the story no one wanted to talk about anymore. At first, she thought she should be grateful. She could finally work without the burn of eyes following her. But as the days stretched on, the quiet felt heavier than the gossip had ever been. She hadn't seen Michael since the meeting. He had kept his word. He'd stepped back, and she hated how much she noticed his absence. Each night when the clock struck midnight and the halls went still, she found herself glancing toward the cafeteria, half expecting to see him there, with his half-empty coffee and that maddening calm. But the table where he used to sit stayed empty, and the quiet between them grew like a wound that wouldn't close. It was almost a week later when Dr. Ellison found her in the pediatric wing. You've been quiet lately, he said, stepping beside her as she checked a monitor. Claire didn't look up. Isn't that what everyone wanted? He sighed. The board decided not to pursue disciplinary action. Officially, you're cleared. She nodded. So I get to keep my job. Yes, he said, but you might want to consider transferring departments, somewhere smaller, quieter. She looked at him then, tired but firm. I'm not running, doctor. I already did once, and look where it got me. He hesitated. You know, Reed's foundation just froze all new funding projects. He pulled himself off every committee. That made her stop. What? He told the board he needed to reassess priorities, Ellison said. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound good. Claire felt her chest tighten. So he's the one losing now. He made his choice, Ellison said softly. Same as you. After he left, she stood there in the dim light of the ward, her hands trembling slightly. If Michael really had stepped back from everything, it meant the cost of defending her had been greater than she'd realized. She wanted to call him, to ask why, but she didn't, because she already knew. 2 nights later, it rained again. She stayed late, finishing paperwork long after her shift ended. The rain tapped gently against the window, rhythmic and soft, like it was waiting for her to remember. When she finally left the building, the parking lot was nearly empty. The air smelled of wet asphalt and blooming magnolias. She was halfway to her car when a familiar voice broke through the drizzle. Still no umbrella? Her heart stuttered. Michael stood by the lamppost, rain dripping from his hair, his suit jacket soaked through. He looked tired, more than she'd ever seen him, but his smile was still the same. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I could say the same to you. She crossed her arms, though her pulse betrayed her composure. You disappeared. You told me to. I didn't mean. She stopped herself. You know what? Maybe I did. He took a step closer. And how did that work out? Peaceful, she said, though the word tasted like a lie. He smiled faintly. Liar, she sighed, rain misting her hair. What do you want, Michael? To talk. About what? He hesitated. About the fact that I miss the sound of your voice. Her chest tightened. You think saying things like that makes it easier? No, he said, but it's true. The rain grew steadier, wrapping them in a curtain of sound. She looked at him, the man who had somehow walked into her quiet life and set it ablaze, and wondered how she could still feel angry and grateful in the same breath. I heard about the foundation, she said. You stepped down. I had to, he said simply. The board wanted me to apologize for speaking out. I told them the truth doesn't need an apology. She shook her head. You gave up everything. I gave up noise, he corrected. The rest wasn't worth keeping. Michael, he stepped closer, his voice barely above the rain. You told me once you wanted to survive on your own terms. I think you were right, but maybe surviving doesn't mean being alone. Her throat ached. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said, but nothing worth doing ever is. They stood there for a long moment, neither speaking. Finally, she said, You shouldn't have come back. Probably not, he agreed, but you look like you'd forgotten how to smile. She felt tears rise unbidden, mixing with the rain. You don't get to say that. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a small black umbrella, frayed at the edges, familiar as breath. You left this behind, he said. She stared at it. I thought you told me to keep it. I said you could return it when it stopped raining, he said softly. But it never really does it? She laughed through the lump in her throat. You really think an umbrella fixes anything? No, he said, stepping close enough that she could see the raindrops sliding down his jaw. But it's a start. She hesitated, then reached out. Their fingers brushed as she took it, the contact sparking something deep and dangerous. Thank you, she whispered. He smiled, small and tired. For what? For showing up, she said. He exhaled, relief flickering through his expression. Then I'll try not to stop. The rain fell harder, but under the weak light of the lamppost, it didn't feel cold anymore. For the first time in a long time, Claire didn't feel like she was standing in a storm. She felt like she'd found shelter inside it. The next morning, the world seemed softer. The air was still cool from the rain, the city washed clean, every surface gleaming with sunlight. Claire arrived at the hospital early, coffee in hand, her mind surprisingly calm. She'd spent most of the night replaying her conversation with Michael under that flickering lamppost, the way his voice had sounded when he said maybe surviving doesn't mean being alone. She hated how much those words had settled into her chest. When she entered the ward, the first thing she noticed was the silence. No whispers, no sideways glances. Just the normal rhythm of the day, machines beeping, voices low, footsteps measured. The storm that had consumed her life for weeks had finally passed, or so she thought. "Claire," Dr. Ellison called from the end of the hall. His tone was clipped, urgent. "A moment." She followed him into his office, already bracing herself. "There's been another article," he said, gesturing toward his computer. "Someone leaked internal reports, donor lists, board minutes. They're suggesting that Mr. Reed's donations to this hospital were part of a personal arrangement." Her stomach dropped. "That's a lie." "I know," Ellison said, "but it doesn't matter. The press is calling again, and the board's panicking. They're holding an emergency meeting at noon. You should prepare yourself." "For what?" "For them to ask you to step away again," he said softly. "Maybe permanently." Claire sank into the chair opposite him. She felt the world tilt again, that familiar, sickening vertigo of being helpless against rumor. She'd fought for truth once, but truth, it seemed, was never enough. At noon, the boardroom was packed. The chairwoman's voice was cold, precise. "Miss Morgan, we appreciate your service to this hospital, but we can't afford to jeopardize our partnerships or reputation. We ask that you take an indefinite leave of absence until further notice." Claire sat still, hands clasped in her lap. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Public perception doesn't hinge on guilt," another board member said. "It hinges on narrative." "So I'm being punished because the world prefers lies? Because we have to protect this institution?" Before she could reply, the door opened. Michael Reed walked in. The entire room went still. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't even on the board anymore. But the sheer weight of his presence silenced every protest. His gaze swept across the table before landing on Claire. "I was told you were removing one of your best nurses," he said evenly. "Is that true?" The chairwoman's composure faltered. "Mr. Reed, this is an internal matter." "I helped build this hospital," he said. "So it's my matter too." "Your recent actions have already damaged our reputation enough," one man snapped. Michael smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "You think integrity is damage? We think discretion is survival." He stepped closer, his tone sharpening. "Then maybe you've forgotten what survival costs the people who actually work here." The room went quiet again. Every word he spoke carried that calm authority of someone who had stopped caring what anyone thought. Then he turned to Claire. "Do you want to stay?" Her throat tightened. "Of course I do." He nodded once, then faced the board again. "Then she stays." "You can't dictate," the chairwoman began, but he cut her off. "I can withdraw every dollar of my foundation's funding by the end of the week," he said. "Every project, every partnership, every name on every wall. And I will, unless you start treating your staff with the dignity you claim to uphold." The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the board members cleared his throat. "That would cripple the hospital, Mr. Reed." "Then maybe it deserves to start over," he said. No one spoke after that. The chairwoman's jaw tightened. "Fine. Miss Morgan will remain on staff." Claire exhaled shakily, the tension leaving her in waves. Michael nodded. "Wise choice." As the meeting adjourned, he walked out without another word, and Claire followed him into the corridor. "What was that?" she demanded. "Damage control," he said simply. "You just threatened to destroy an entire hospital." "I didn't threaten," he said. "I promised." She shook her head. "You can't keep saving me like this." He met her gaze, calm but unyielding. "I'm not saving you, Claire. I'm standing beside you." "That's not the same thing." "It is to me." She wanted to argue, to tell him that his world of power and press releases wasn't hers, that every time he tried to protect her, she ended up smaller in the eyes of everyone else. But when she looked at him, she couldn't bring herself to say it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Because I believe in what's right." "That's not an answer." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but it's the truth." She sighed. "You're going to burn bridges you can't rebuild." He shrugged. "Then I'll build new ones." "Michael?" "Claire," he interrupted softly. "When you met me, you saw a man sitting alone in a restaurant. You didn't see the headlines or the money or the noise. You just saw me. Do you know how rare that is?" She didn't answer. "So if I have to lose everything to prove that kindness still matters," he said, "then so be it." Her chest tightened. "You don't have to prove anything." "Neither do you," he said gently. "But you do need to start believing that you deserve more than just survival." For a long moment they stood in the quiet hum of the hospital corridor, the place where all of it had begun and nearly ended. Finally Claire whispered, "You can't fix the world for me, Michael." He smiled sadly. "No, but I can stand in the rain with you while you do." The words hung between them, fragile and real, and when she looked at him this time, she realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the storm after all. He was the shelter she'd stopped believing existed. The following week was quiet, eerily so. The scandal that had consumed headlines for months finally burned itself out, replaced by fresher chaos in the news cycle. The hospital stopped fielding calls, reporters stopped camping outside, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Claire could walk through the corridors without feeling like a walking headline. But peace, she learned, could feel just as heavy as chaos. Michael had kept his distance again, this time without her asking. She knew he was busy, restructuring his foundation, dissolving partnerships, rebuilding from the ashes of his own defiance. Yet every morning she half expected to see him in the cafeteria with that crooked smile and that cup of terrible coffee. He never was. It should have been a relief. Instead, it hurt. "Still thinking about him?" Anna asked one evening over the phone. Claire had called her sister just to hear a familiar voice. "You make it sound like I'm lovesick." "Are you?" Claire hesitated. "He complicated my life." Anna laughed softly. "That's not an answer." "Because there isn't one," Claire said. "He showed up when everything felt small and impossible, and then he left, and the world just went back to being what it was." "Maybe it didn't," Anna said. "Maybe you just changed." Claire went quiet. Her sister had a way of finding the truth she didn't want to face. Anna continued, her tone softening. "You fought for yourself, Claire. You didn't let anyone decide who you were, not even him. That's not small." Claire smiled faintly. "You always make things sound simpler than they are." "Because sometimes they are," Anna said. "You just don't believe it yet." That night, as she walked home from her shift, the city was wrapped in fog. The streetlights glowed like halos in the mist, and the pavement shimmered with the memory of rain. She clutched her jacket tighter around her, lost in thought. Halfway down the block, a voice broke through the quiet. "Still no umbrella?" Her heart stuttered. Michael stepped out of the shadows, hands in his coat pockets, rain beating on his hair. He looked different, tired, older somehow, but when he smiled, the exhaustion melted away. "I swear," Claire said, half laughing, "you have a talent for appearing when it rains." "I could say the same about you," he replied. They stood there for a moment, the kind of silence that felt full instead of empty. "I thought you were gone," she said finally. "I was," he said, "but some things aren't meant to stay unfinished." "What did you come here for, Michael?" He took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "To tell you I'm leaving." Her chest tightened. "Leaving?" He nodded. "I'm selling the last of my company shares. The foundation will continue without me. I need—" He paused, searching for the right words. "To start over somewhere quieter, somewhere I'm not a headline." "And you're telling me because I didn't want to disappear again without saying goodbye." She stared at him, struggling to steady her breath. "You don't owe me that." "I owe you more than that," he said softly. "You reminded me what integrity looks like when the world forgets it exists." "Don't turn me into a lesson, Michael." "I'm not," he said. "I'm thanking you." She wanted to be angry. She wanted to tell him that gratitude wasn't enough, that he didn't get to upend her life and then walk away with poetic closure. But when she met his eyes, steady, sincere, her anger dissolved into something else. Resignation, sadness, maybe love. He exhaled, stepping closer. "I keep thinking about that night at the restaurant," he said. "The look on your face when you read that text. I didn't know then that it would change both our lives." Claire smiled faintly. "I didn't either." "You could have ignored me," he said. "You probably should have." "I tried," she said. That made him laugh softly, the quiet, unguarded kind that had once disarmed her completely. I thought I was rescuing you that night, he said. Turns out I was the one who needed saving. Michael, he shook his head. Don't worry, I'm not here to make grand declarations. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. She blinked. Proud? You stood in a room full of people who'd already decided who you were and told them they were wrong. You didn't need me, Claire. You never did. She swallowed hard. Then why does it feel like I'm losing something anyway? He smiled, sadness flickering in his eyes. Because endings always hurt, even when they're right. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper, slightly crumpled. What's this? She asked. A ticket, he said, to the new pediatric wing's opening ceremony next month. It's the last project my foundation completed. It's yours more than mine. She took it carefully. Will you be there? He hesitated. No, it needs to belong to people who stay. She looked down at the ticket, fighting the lump in her throat. So this is goodbye, he nodded once. For now. Michael, she said softly, you don't have to keep walking away. He gave a small, bittersweet smile. If I stay, I'll make it harder for you to move forward. And you deserve to. Don't tell me what I deserve, she whispered. Then tell me what you want. The words caught her off guard. She wanted to say she wanted him to stay. She wanted to say she was tired of surviving alone. But she couldn't, not yet. Not when the pieces of her life were only just starting to fit again. So instead, she said, I want you to find peace. He nodded slowly. Then maybe we both will. He started to walk away. For a moment, she thought about calling after him, but something stopped her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was strength. Maybe it was love choosing patience instead of fear. When he reached the corner, he turned back and said, Don't forget to return the umbrella someday. She smiled through her tears. Only when it stops raining. He grinned faintly, then disappeared into the mist. And as the rain began to fall again, Claire didn't run for shelter this time. She stood there letting it soak through her clothes, the cold mixing with the quiet ache in her chest. Because this time, the rain didn't feel like loss. It felt like something beginning again. Spring came softly, as if the world had decided that both of them had earned a gentler season. By the time the hospital's new pediatric wing opened, the city was draped in sunlight and cherry blossoms. Children's laughter spilled from the courtyard, mingling with the music and the hum of guests arriving for the ceremony. The event had been in every paper for days, the hospital's triumph after a turbulent year. Claire stood near the glass doors, her ID badge pinned neatly, a bouquet of white tulips cradled in her arms. She wasn't part of the speeches or the ribbon cutting. She'd insisted on working the shift instead, helping the first young patients move into the bright, freshly painted rooms. The wing gleamed, soft yellows, sky blues, murals of rainbows and clouds. Hope had a color now, and she could see it in the way the children smiled as they explored. Still, she couldn't help noticing the empty space near the back of the crowd. He wasn't there. She told herself she'd known he wouldn't be. He'd said goodbye weeks ago, his life untethered from the noise and glare of the world they'd once shared. Still, part of her had hoped that maybe, just maybe, he'd appear, hands in his pockets, wearing that calm half-smile that always made her forget where she was. She sighed quietly and turned back to her patients. Miss Morgan, Dr. Ellison said as he approached, his tone softer than usual. They're asking for you. The press wants a quote from one of the night shift nurses who actually worked through the construction. Claire laughed, shaking her head. They don't want my quote. They just want a photo for the story. Maybe, Ellison said, smiling faintly. But you should still let them take it. You earned this. She hesitated, then followed him toward the crowd gathering near the stage. The chairwoman was finishing her speech. This hospital was built on compassion and courage, she said, her voice echoing through the atrium. And none embodied those more than our staff, especially those who stood tall through our most difficult days. Applause rippled through the room. Claire forced a smile for the cameras as the ribbon was cut. It was polite, measured, but her mind wasn't there. It was outside, beyond the glass doors where sunlight fell across the courtyard and the air smelled like rain waiting to happen. When the crowd began to thin, she slipped away quietly, the tulips still in her arms. She found herself walking toward the old bench by the fountain, a spot tucked behind the hospital garden. The one place that had stayed untouched during construction, the place she'd gone when she needed to breathe. She sat, the world around her quiet except for the distant laughter of children. The tulips rested beside her, petals trembling in the breeze. For a long moment she simply listened. The wind, the water, the echo of all the chaos that had once filled her life, and how far away it suddenly seemed. Then behind her, a voice said softly, "You always find the quietest place in the world." Her breath caught. She turned, heart pounding. Michael stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, sunlight catching the faint lines of exhaustion on his face. He looked different, less polished, more human, a simple gray shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair a little longer than before. "Hi," he said. She blinked, unable to speak for a moment. What are you doing here?" He smiled faintly. "I told you I wouldn't come." "Then why did you?" "I changed my mind." He stepped closer, and for the first time since he'd left, she didn't feel anger or confusion, just the quiet, steady warmth of something familiar returning. "You look better," he said gently, "happier." "I'm trying," she said. "It's getting easier." "I'm glad." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. "You left," she said finally. "You disappeared again." "I needed to see what life looked like without fixing everything," he said. "It's humbling." "And what did you find?" He smiled. "That it rains everywhere, no matter how far you run. But some storms are worth standing in." Her chest tightened. "You always did have a way of turning the weather into poetry." "It's not poetry," he said. "It's memory." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A small, familiar object, creased, black, the edges frayed from years of use. The umbrella. "You kept it?" she asked softly. "I told you," he said, holding it out to her. "You could return it when it stopped raining." She looked at the clear sky above them. "It hasn't, has it?" "Maybe not," he said. "But now when it does, I want you to have something of your own." She smiled faintly. "And you?" He shrugged. "I'll manage." She took the umbrella, her fingers brushing his. For a second, everything stilled. The sunlight, the breeze, the noise of the world. Just them. "I don't know what this is, Michael," she said softly. "What we are." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But it doesn't have to be anything yet. We don't owe anyone a definition." She looked down at the tulips beside her, their petals trembling in the wind. "So what happens now?" He smiled, eyes warm. "Now? You keep doing what you do best. You stay standing." "And you?" "I'll try to deserve the version of me you saw that night in the restaurant." Her throat tightened. "You already do." He stepped closer, then stopped. Close enough for her to feel his warmth, but far enough to leave her a choice. "Then maybe," he said softly, "we can both start over. Not from what the world saw, but from what we found in the rain." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of magnolias and something unspoken. She nodded, unable to find words, and for the first time in months, the ache in her chest felt lighter. They stood together beneath the open sky, the old umbrella between them, its black fabric fluttering in the wind. No headlines, no whispers, no promises. Just two people who had survived the storm, finally unafraid of what came next. And when the first drops of rain began to fall, Claire laughed quietly and opened the umbrella. "Still raining," she said. Michael smiled, stepping under its worn canopy beside her. "Good," he murmured. "That means we're still us." They walked forward through the drizzle, their reflections shimmering on the wet pavement, two shadows beneath a single umbrella, moving toward a future they didn't need to define to finally believe in.